Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories. Please like and subscribe, and hit that notification icon so you never miss out. Now on with the stories.
Living in a neighborhood with an HOA is supposed to offer a certain level of protection from chaos and disarray, right? That's what I thought when I first moved in anyway. You pay these fees, follow the rules, and the idea is that your home is nestled in a community where everyone respects each other's space, keeps their yards clean, and lives in harmony. In theory. The reality, though, people are thoughtless pigs, and this neighborhood, it's a zoo. Our HOA, in their infinite wisdom, says we can keep trash cans on the side of our house. Now, maybe they figured most people would be reasonable about where they put them, or maybe they just didn't care, but here's the thing. They didn't exactly spell out where the trash cans should go, except that they needed to be on the side of the house. Naturally, most people pick the side their driveway is on. I mean, I get it. Who wants to haul their trash across the lawn? Especially when you can conveniently place the cans just a few feet from your car. But here's the kicker. My lovely neighbor decided to take full advantage of this ambiguous rule. Not only does he have his trash cans on the side of his house, oh no, he's got 8 of them. And I don't know what kind of household needs 8 trash cans unless you're running some underground garbage collection business. The guy's a hoarder, no doubt about it. He puts out maybe 1 or 2 cans on trash day, leaving the other 6 festering right next to my window. And I'm not talking about a few feet away either. These cans are 3 feet from my living room windows. 3 feet. That's practically in my house. The smell, oh, it's not just bad, it's gag-worthy. Imagine the kind of odor that hits you when the wind blows just right, carrying with it the delightful fragrance of decaying food, stale beer, and whatever else is fermenting in there. It's like a dumpster fire in slow motion. Opening my windows is out of the question. Who wants to enjoy a sunny day with the smell of rot wafting into their home? And it doesn't stop there. No, behind his fence, right outside my side patio and sliding glass doors, this guy has managed to pile up his junk 4 feet high. And he's got a yard, mind you, a whole yard. But instead of using it to, I don't know, organize his HOA, he decides to stack it all right where I have to look at it every time I step outside. I'm talking old appliances, rusted lawn equipment, plastic bins filled with who knows what, and God only knows how many boxes just rotting away in the sun. The worst part, he's actually a really nice guy. Polite, always waves hello, chats with the neighbors. But there's a level of stupidity here that I can't wrap my head around. It's like he genuinely doesn't realize how this impacts the people living around him. How do you have a conversation with someone about their trash cans, their HOA, without sounding like a complete jerk? I tried dropping subtle hints at first. You know, the polite, neighborly thing to do. Hey man, I noticed you've got quite a few trash cans. Must be a lot of stuff to throw out, huh? He'd just laugh it off, saying something about needing to clean out the garage or the basement, but nothing ever changed. The pile behind the fence, it just kept growing, inching closer to my patio like some kind of grotesque sculpture of neglect. One summer evening, I made the mistake of hosting a small gathering on my patio. We were having a nice time, grilling, chatting, until the wind shifted. I swear, the smell that hit us could have knocked a grown man to his knees. It was like the trash cans exploded, sending a wave of putrid air directly into our faces. My friends tried to be polite, but I could see it in their eyes. No one wanted to stay. Who could blame them? I had to apologize, explain that it wasn't my trash, and pray that they wouldn't remember my house as that place with the garbage smell. And yet there I was, stuck next to a hoarder whose personal landfill was becoming my daily view. I had to do something. After the barbecue disaster, I decided enough was enough. The next time I saw him outside, I went over to talk. I rehearsed in my head 1,000,000 times how I would bring it up, casually, non-confrontational. I didn't want to seem unreasonable, after all. But as soon as I approached him, all that planning went out the window. Listen, I started, trying to keep my tone light. I've been meaning to talk to you about the trash cans and, well, the stuff behind the fence. It's starting to become a bit of a problem. The smell, the view, you know? He looked genuinely surprised, like the thought had never crossed his mind that anyone would be bothered by it. Oh, really? I didn't think it was that bad, he said, rubbing the back of his neck like a kid who'd just been caught sneaking candy before dinner. Yeah, it's pretty bad, I said, trying to laugh it off, even though inside I was fuming. Maybe if you moved them to the other side of your house, or spread the stuff out a little more in the yard, well, I'd have to walk across the lawn to get to the trash cans then, he said, completely serious. Like that was the most unreasonable suggestion in the world. I stood there, speechless. How do you respond to that? How lazy do you have to be that walking across your lawn is a deal-breaker? I wanted to scream, but instead I smiled, nodded, and walked away, hoping that maybe, just maybe, he'd take the hint and do something. Of course nothing changed. The trash cans stayed where they were. The pile behind the fence grew, and my frustration reached a boiling point. I considered going to the HOA, but what would that do? They had already allowed the trash cans on the side of the house. They didn't care. And the last thing I wanted was to be known as the neighbor who went crying to the HOA over some garbage. But then, one day, I noticed something. The pile behind the fence had grown so high it was starting to lean dangerously toward my patio. I'm no expert, but even I could see it was just one good gust of wind away from toppling over. And that's when I had an idea. A petty, childish idea, but an idea nonetheless. I waited for the perfect storm, literally. The forecast called for high winds and thunderstorms, and I knew it was only a matter of time before that pile of junk came crashing down. Sure enough, around midnight, the wind picked up, howling through the neighborhood. I heard it before I saw it, the loud crash of metal and plastic hitting the ground. I went to my sliding glass door and looked out, barely able to suppress a grin. His junk pile had collapsed, spilling into my yard like the world's worst piñata. The next morning I found him out there, staring at the mess, hands on his hips, clearly bewildered by how this had happened. I walked over, coffee in hand, pretending to be sympathetic. "Wow, that storm really did a number on your stuff, huh?" I said, trying to hide my satisfaction. "Yeah, I don't know how this happened," he muttered, shaking his head. "Well," I said, taking a sip of my coffee, "maybe now would be a good time to, move some of it to the other side of your yard. Just a thought." He sighed, clearly defeated, and nodded. "Yeah, maybe you're right. It wasn't the victory I wanted, but it was a small win." He cleaned up the mess, and for a few blissful weeks my view was free of his hoard. But like clockwork, the junk slowly started to creep back. While complaining about trash cans, really, if that's what keeps you up at night, I'd say you're living a pretty cushy life. I mean, come on, there are so many real issues in the world that deserve our attention. Climate change, social justice, economic inequality. And here you are focusing on where someone stores their garbage. If this is the extent of your complaints, it might be time for some self-reflection. Instead of being passive-aggressive and expecting others to conform to your standards of cleanliness or orderliness, why not just have an honest conversation with your neighbor? It's not that hard. People often don't realize when they're bothering someone else until it's brought to their attention. You could save yourself a lot of stress, and possibly even build a better relationship with your neighbor by simply discussing it like adults. Trust me, it'll be way more productive than stewing in frustration over something so trivial. You know what's really trashy here? Your attitude. You're acting like the very thing this community is against. HOAs are supposed to protect property values and maintain community standards, not micromanage every little thing a homeowner does. The fact that you're upset about your HOA allowing someone freedom on their own property is mind-boggling. Do you realize how entitled and controlling you sound? Have you ever stopped to think that maybe your neighbor has a good reason for storing their trash cans the way they do? Maybe they have physical limitations, or perhaps their work schedule makes it difficult to move them at the appropriate times. Instead of jumping to conclusions and complaining, why don't you try having a conversation with them? You might learn something. This kind of nitpicky, judgmental attitude is exactly why so many people hate HOAs. If you can't handle seeing a trash can, maybe you need to reevaluate your priorities. There are far more important things in life than where someone stores their garbage. Live and let live, for crying out loud.
If you like our stories, then please like and subscribe and comment, and remember to hit that bell icon so you never miss out. We have new stories almost every day.
I had only been living in my new place for a few months when I got my first taste of the HOA drama. I should have expected something, but at the time, I was still getting used to the place. I mean, it's not every day you move into a community with a whole set of rules to follow, right? The meeting with a board member wasn't something I was particularly looking forward to, but it had to be done. I figured it would be a simple discussion, nothing major, just going over a few things I'd already picked up on my own. Turns out I was wrong. The first thing that threw me was the notice. Apparently I had to pull some weeds. Like that was the most urgent thing in the world for them to send me a notice about. But here's the thing. The bylaws, which I'd actually read, said that anything beyond 3 feet from my building was the HOA's responsibility. And these weeds, they were way beyond that 3-foot mark. So, of course, I wanted clarification. I wasn't trying to be difficult. I just wanted to understand if I was supposed to be responsible for something that seemed like it wasn't mine to worry about. When I met with the board member, I explained the situation calmly. I said something along the lines of, "If it's mine, then fine. I'm just trying to understand. I'm a rule follower." That's when it happened. She frowned. Not just a regular frown, but one of those exaggerated, slow frowns, as if I had just said something incredibly offensive. Then she let out an audible "oh" that dragged on. And I swear it was as if she was implying that I was the one being unreasonable. Me, unreasonable, for asking if I needed to pull some damn weeds. The expression on her face made it clear. She didn't think much of rule followers. I could almost hear her thoughts. Are you really going to hold us accountable for some weeds here or there? Now, here's the other thing. I didn't want to push back too hard. I didn't want to be that person. You know, the one who gets a reputation for nitpicking every single thing, especially not with the maintenance crew. Those are the folks who could easily make your life harder if they felt like it. So I was stuck. Do I push back and risk getting on their bad side, or do I just let it go and pull the damn weeds myself? But it wasn't just about the weeds. It was the principle of the whole thing. This wasn't some flower bed that I wanted to divide up with stakes and string like some overly obsessive gardener. We were talking about a large bed a good few feet away from my front door and clearly in the HOA's territory. I bought this place knowing there would be rules, and I was fine with that. I don't mind living within a system, but it's frustrating when you're trying to follow the rules, and the other side just brushes off their end of the bargain. That's what bugged me the most. As if that wasn't enough, the conversation took an unexpected turn. We had started talking about home prices because why not? It's always a hot topic, and I casually mentioned the current high interest rates. That's when she lit up. Her whole face shifted from that disapproving frown to this smug, satisfied look, like she had been waiting for her moment to one-up me. She couldn't hold back. "You know, when I bought my house in 1985, she began, with that oh-so-pleasant tone people use when they're about to humble brag, interest rates were 12%. I just blinked at her. Was that supposed to impress me? I knew where this was going, but I was already too deep in the conversation to escape. She didn't stop there. "And we managed just fine," she continued. As if buying a house in 1985 with a 12% interest rate was the same as buying one now with rates that are lower but paired with home prices that are astronomically higher. Back then, houses cost, 2 times your annual income? Now they're 5 times, but sure, interest rates are so hard for your generation. She let out this tiny, smug chuckle, the kind that makes your skin crawl. I wanted to scream, but instead I just sat there, biting my tongue. I could see it in her eyes. She thought she had made some grand point, like she was teaching me some great life lesson. But all I could think about was how completely out of touch she was. It wasn't just about the interest rates, it was everything. Housing prices, wages, the entire cost of living. But trying to explain that to her, pointless. She was already mentally patting herself on the back. So there I was, stuck in this conversation, stewing about the weeds, the bylaws, and now this unsolicited lecture on how much tougher things were in the 80s. It wasn't exactly the way I imagined my HOA meeting going, but here's the thing, I wasn't going to let it slide. I wanted to push back, but I also knew I had to be careful. You push too hard, and suddenly you're on everyone's radar. I didn't want to be that person. The one who gets whispered about at every board meeting. The one who gets a little extra scrutiny on their lawn or the way their trash cans are put out. No, I wanted to keep flying under the radar, for now at least. But that didn't mean I was going to let it go completely. The whole conversation kept playing over in my head for days. Was I overreacting? Maybe. But at the same time, it felt like a bigger issue than just some weeds or an old-timer's housing market nostalgia. It felt like I was dealing with a system that didn't actually care about fairness or clarity. They just wanted compliance. I could sense it. The unspoken rule that as long as you didn't ask too many questions, as long as you kept your head down, you'd be fine. But if you questioned things, even a little, you'd start to stand out. And standing out was dangerous in a place like this. I'd catch myself staring out my window, looking at the exact spot where the weeds had been growing. I could pull them. It wouldn't take more than a few minutes. But every time I thought about it, I got this knot in my stomach. It wasn't just about the weeds anymore. It was about what those weeds represented. If I pulled them, I'd be admitting defeat, accepting that the rules didn't really matter, that the board could pick and choose when to enforce them, and I just had to go along with it. But if I didn't pull them, what then? A follow-up notice, a fine, worse, more smug comments from the board member next time we met. I still hadn't decided what to do. Every time I thought I'd made up my mind, that irritating little "oh" she'd given me played in my head. That frown, that tone, it was like a challenge, daring me to follow through and make a big deal out of it. And for what? To prove that I was right. And so the weeds stayed where they were, growing a little taller each day. The tension grew with them too. Every time I passed by, I thought about that stupid meeting, that board member's smug look, and the whole ridiculous situation. I wasn't sure what my next move would be, but one thing was clear: this wasn't over. I agree. I would use a measuring tape from my front door to said weeds and send them a short video or photos and explain, those aren't my weeds to pull. If they have the never to tell you to pull them, then they should accept their own rules that say, not if it's further than 3 feet. If they want to amend the rules, make them put it to a homeowner vote. If we're sending notices to homeowners for weeds, then we're holding the HOA accountable for maintaining their areas. If we aren't policing individual homeowners for minor offenses like weeds, then we can pardon the HOA as well. The level of enforcement should be equal at all times. You have to pick your battles. We used to live in an HOA, and one neighbor would bitch and moan when we left a stroller out. For context, this was a large 2-kid stroller. We explained it was unsafe when there is only one caregiver on duty for them to leave children unattended to fold up and put away stroller. We made a deal that we'd put it away as soon as 2 people were home. That same neighbor later complained that we weren't keeping our window shades in a similar fashion to others. For context, we had 4 windows in the front of home with adjustable blinds. Turns out, it tweaked his OCD when we didn't have all 4 of them open or closed at the same time or in the same direction. The bylaw he used as the basis did say fashion, but I argued that it meant style or color of the shades. I told them they had no right to dictate if I open or close my blinds, and suggested that only perverts or a pedophile would want to control the view in a home with little kids. They were a cluster of old boomers that shut them up for good.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.